robotic vacuums have been a thing for the last decade or so, and now they're starting to get robotic arms that will actually pick up socks and move things out of the way. And we're getting to the point where they're beyond experimental and starting to become truly useful labor-saving devices. And then we can sit back and play PlayStation for more hours per day, right? Like that's the dream.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and great to have Josh Webb joining me for this, our first live episode for 2025. So great to see you, Josh.
Cheers, Paul. Happy 25.
Yes, it's an exciting year ahead, I hope. Maybe you can let listeners who don't know you know where you fit into this big wide world of tech and startups and the like.
Yeah, so I'm a Kiwi American, long-time entrepreneur, long-time CTO, CPO, done everything, etc. Current life is I'm a consultant. I'm actually focused on sort of innovation, new product development, and currently run my own consultancy, and also work quite closely with a company called Hyper that is very much in the new product development mode. A lot of our stuff we do is sort of top secret stealth mode work, so at the moment I'm doing one of those projects. But yeah, that's probably about the summary. How does that sound?
Yep. Yeah, we won't get you into any trouble asking you too many difficult questions about things that you're not supposed to speak of, but maybe at some point in the future you'll be able to share a little bit more. Of course, before we jump in, a big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark HP, and Gorilla Technology. Really appreciate their support, keeping us on air, as it were. I know that's a term in 2025, is it? But I guess to a degree. But yeah, I guess how podcasts get transmitted varies depending on where you are and how you like to consume, right?
We were just talking about this, weren't we? So more and more it is actually coming back on the air, and my vision for the future is that we'll just get rid of cables altogether and everything will be wireless. Because honestly, I think in life, cables are still one of the biggest problems that humans have.
That could be quite a big debate. So maybe we'll come back to that when we sort of start talking about communications. But I mean, yeah, certainly we've got used to so much in terms of wireless communications and so on over the years. Not so far on the wireless power yet. But anyway, so we'll come back on that one. And I guess delving into a couple of the local stories. There was an internet outage in the Kaipara district in Northland that impacted a whole bunch of businesses who, I guess were probably on with fibre connections, and those things had been impacted after a digger took out a fibre optic cable. So around 2,000 premises, homes and businesses were impacted, and I guess this sort of speaks to what you're talking about in terms of wireless. When we rely on cables, then that can be impacted. But I guess to get wireless infrastructure like cell sites and so on, in a lot of cases they're relying on fibre type backhaul and the like. But yeah, it is a reminder that I guess, to a degree, whatever technology you go with can be impacted in one way or another, whether through, a cable getting knocked out, a mobile service getting impacted in some way, a software vendor, having a disruption. But a 13-hour outage would have, I'm sure, been quite a challenge for some of those businesses that are used to having a, FPOS service and, credit card transactions online.
Yeah, I kind of looked at this article and thought, so the summary of this is a North Power digger broke a chorus fibre and the internet stopped working in Dargaville for a day. Okay, so, I mean, obviously to local businesses that are impacted, that's a bit rough and it's never a good thing. On the other hand, I mean, sometimes being disconnected is a good thing, right? I remember living through Superstorm Sandy, and when I lived in Lower Manhattan, and I spent 2 weeks with no internet and no power and no connectivity of any kind, and it was one of the greatest times of my life. So, and it just made me think back and think about this sort of other meta trend that's going on of disconnection, right? Like actually the younger generations are starting to go, we need to be disconnected. We need to turn that into a thing. And yeah, whilst this was a business story, it actually made me think about that other side of things of how reliant we are. It's been 25 years really since widespread internet became a thing in this country at least. And that's not that long when you think about it. It's become so just, part of the furniture now.
Yeah, 100%, and yeah, that's certainly becoming a more common conversation. I'm having too, as we look at sort of satellite internet and internet being able to get to you now in all manner of different places. Is, well, hey, when do you decide not to use it, and is it something you just have on tap all the time because you can? Or actually, are there some benefits in not being staring at screens and not having connectivity?
So what was the exact date? I'd like to hear
24/7
from the good folks of Dargaville if on January the 12th or whatever it was, were any new relationships founded? Were any friendships made? Did people talk to someone they haven't talked to for a while? What were the upsides of this?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a good reminder, isn't it, that good things can come from being disconnected. I spent one particular chunk of the summer break, and we got to a lot of different places, but one bay in particular, Banks Peninsula near Christchurch, we were in this bay that you kind of got to through a farmer's property, and fortunately my brother is been, I guess, going there for a long time, and the farmers let us go and park up a camper van there and so on, but it was completely, you were completely off grid, and that was a really interesting experience because it's probably been a while since I've been off grid or away from internet, certainly away from internet connectivity and mobile coverage for a number of days. Now, me being me, I always like to test some technology, so of course I'd thrown in my backpack a little mini Starlink Mini dish to try out, and just to be able to check in from time to time. But I very quickly came to the conclusion that it's actually good not having any connectivity. So yeah, we only plugged it in for short periods of time, and I just had some portable batteries that I was able to run it off a sort of USB-C type connection. But yeah, there was one occasion where my brother was either going to have to go for a bit of a drive up to see the farmers and have a chat to them, or he could just give them a call. So I hooked up the Starlink, and of course all our mobile networks in New Zealand now, you can do IP calling. So as long as you've got an internet connection, your normal texting and mobile calling services just light up as though you've got a connection to the cell site. So he did that, was very pleased with it. He ended up mentioning it to the farmers, who mentioned that their connectivity to this particular bay with Chorus had got impacted at some stage, I don't know, over the last year or two. And I don't know the full story on how challenging, how long it was going to take Chorus to fix, or whether they just didn't even bother and they just went and bought a Starlink. But their connectivity has switched from having, I guess some sort of DSL connection, maybe, certainly, copper phone line. That's all happening now over Starlink. So there's some interesting sort of aspects as well to, as we get newer types of connectivity, how does delivering broadband to these rural locations and any sort of telephony connection, how does that play out? And of course, part of the cost that telcos have had to contribute to or do contribute to is making sure that we can provide a service sort of right across society. But of course, satellite connectivity starts making some of that sort of stuff a whole lot easier.
I was a big fan of Starlink. I was one of the first adopters in New Zealand, in fact, and have been constantly surprised about how great it is because my place is rural, my place in Wellington. But yeah, it's just makes you think, doesn't it, how rare it is to hear about people that just don't have connectivity available these days because it's just so widespread. Well, it's great that you managed to take the internet with you on vacation, but more importantly, did you get a bit of sunshine on your feet, Paul? Did you get a bit of boating in? Or
Got
anything?
out in the water. We hauled in 9 crayfish on Christmas morning, so you can imagine Christmas lunch was we were well sport, put it that way. So
Colour me impressed.
so that it was pretty neat actually. So yeah, always nice to get that time with relatives, time with other friends and so on during that window of time. And yeah, I think unplugging was is one of those things that when you get used to being connected in all the time, you realise actually a lot of times it's better for you. So very pleased with that. Now this kind of dovetails into the news that we had sort of leading up to Christmas, that 1NZ and Starlink turned on their service. So this just happened a bit over a week before the end of the year, and we're now in this scenario that if you're on the right handset and you're on the 1NZ network, then you have that potential of being in one of those areas that has 0 cell sites nearby. But of course, there are cell sites flying over now on some of these Starlink satellites. And so the top 3 phones from Samsung are in the list that have got the, if you're looking on the 1NZ website, have got the tick as satellite ready and turned on. So that's the Galaxy Z Flip 6, Z Fold 6, S24 Ultra, and then they've got a list down to some reasonably low-priced smartphones of the last few years, down to their A13, which is, I don't know, 200, or would have been a $200 handset when it was sold. $200 to $300 is my guess anyway. Certainly sub $400 handset. And yeah, those devices are in testing, so no doubt will be on soon. Oppo got their Find X8 Pro, and then they're in testing with some of their Reno 12 models. No news on the Apple front at the moment, but I think the word that was shared by Musk and Starlink was that basically all phones are going to be able to use this service. So my understanding is this is sort of turned on at a sort of a SIM based level based on your phone, or at a connection level. So if you've got one of the right phones, you'll be away.
Do you happen to know what the technology is? I don't know. I've never looked into it. But are they using 5G, 4G, or is there something else that's transceiving?
So this is basically, from the phone's perspective, it just looks like another cell site. Okay. I believe they're 4G, and so it looks like a 4G cell site. However, the capabilities that are turned on initially are just for SMS. And the reason being is there's not enough of the satellites going around to have that with a cellular capability to have continuous access. So if you think of Starlink and you put out your satellite dish, and it's able to pick up multiple satellites at a time and give you that continuous connectivity, but it's only a subset, something like, and I'm pulling numbers out of the air here, but it's certainly at single digits. You could say, I'm just trying to guess here, maybe it's 3% of Starlink dishes or Starlink satellites at the moment have that cellular capability. So you might have to wait a couple of minutes or so to be in coverage for your message to go. But when it gets the connectivity, then the text you've sent will send, and your incoming one will be received. So yeah, that's a new world. I don't imagine it's going to take 1NZ too long to start switching on more phones. Under their SpaceX page, yeah, they've got those handsets listed out for folks that are interested, and we can include that in show notes. Under Apple, it says more information about eligible iPhones is coming soon. My pick is, probably not. We're not waiting months and months for this sort of stuff to happen. It'll probably be turned on largely in weeks, based on a reply saw online from Jason Paris at 1NZ. So the world forever changes. We get to a point where there's virtually no dead spots unless you're in a cave or underwater, etc. Right?
I'm in the Apple ecosystem, so it's still not something available to me. But I do keep noticing the little satellite pop up, and I know that I can see that it's available on my handset. I just it's only available for emergencies.
So that's their global star service that they've had. So iPhone 14s onwards have that capability, and that doesn't use a traditional cell site. So it's talking to those satellites using a different mechanism. But we have a limited capability as far as global star at the moment. Late last year, it was announced that Apple are investing or prepaying global star, I think it's $1.1 billion US dollars to extend or expand their coverage, which I guess at the moment is used for emergency SOS type features sort of predominantly, but is turned on, I think, in the States now that you can use it to send iMessages or text messages if you're out of coverage there as well.
Yeah, there's a sort of big convenience factor, isn't there? But it seems like right now the main use case is still, or the most important use case is sort of emergency situations and I'm stuck in the wilderness and that sort of stuff. And eventually it gets to, I'm on holiday and I don't want to bring my Starlink dish with me for my crayfishing.
Yeah, well, most people aren't going to be doing that, right? That's the sort of reality. But nice to know you've got the connectivity if you need it. I didn't. I probably could have got away without it, but I like to try out and test out these things, and it had been a while since I was in a position of wanting to test the Starlink, and it's pretty impressive technology these days, and how quickly you can get one of those little units, up and running in that sort of scenario.
It's almost instant, isn't it?
It's like, wow, that's really easy. So. Onto other topics. Meta has, I guess, been getting their fair share of attention on an international front. First of all, then they got quite a big backlash after some of these AI identities that they had put online, and I guess they hadn't really got a whole lot of attention before December or January, and it just kind of hit that. Hold on, Meta have been making up these characters. Liv was presented as a proud black queer mama, by Meta, but actually not really a person at all. It was this generated sort of personality creating content.
Yeah, if you have a look at these
in their world, right?
These Meta bots, I hadn't been aware of them. I didn't know they existed. But when I saw this, I took a look at them, and these things are wild. They have really elaborate backstories with families, histories, and all sorts of stuff. And they're floating around on Meta, interacting with people. I'm not sure how you get them to interact. I don't know how you find them. I actually haven't had that experience as a occasional Meta user. But what I do know, and you can see, is that if you ask them about themselves, they'll tell you about themselves. But if you ask them if they're real, they'll straight up tell you, no, we're not real. We pretend. And so they'll basically say, yep, no, I was just lying about that. I made it up. In that sort of uncanny valley AI way that we're probably used to with ChatGPT and things now. But it reminded me of the Jim Carrey movie Liar Liar. When his character is just moving through the world, is unable to lie, and someone asks him a question he doesn't want to answer it, and then he'll go, it's like these things are behaving just like that.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And they were certainly called out in terms of some of the answers that they were giving around, well, who created you? And they were, trying to come up with something that kind of sounded really good and made it look really good. And then as they were sort of pressed a little bit more, they maybe revealed that, maybe they weren't being quite so straight.
One of their answers was, I was programmed by a team of 100 diverse engineers from around the world, and the truth was it was just a handful of people in a room. Something along those lines.
Yeah, so interesting as we see the likes of Facebook and others really experiment with the role of AI and sort of, experiment in differing directions, some of which, just don't go down very well, and you scratch your head and wonder, why did they think this was a good idea? Other use cases that make more sense. Now, the other area where Meta's getting attention is that they've decided to throw out the fact checkers, and this one it certainly caught me by surprise. I know there's been varying admissions across social media companies, X and Facebook of like, well, actually, we messed with XYZ content because the US government told us to, although we weren't legally obliged to, but we did, and we went down these differing tracks. But it seemed in many ways like some wisdom in having some sort of fact checking. But now they've really admitted that the fact checking processes were prone to a lot of issues and actually pretty unreliable. And so they're actually, following the direction that Musk has taken with X, the community notes, functionality, whereby it sort of, comes down to the users of the platform to, to sort of steer a response and clarify whether the content is actually legitimate or not. Do you have a sort of feel of how this will go down? I mean, I kind of like this idea of relying on a broader community. If you've got a big enough base of users, and I guess if they're in one particular political direction or another, that could influence the outcomes. But in general, you should be able to expect people to be able to guide and point back to kind of factual sources and so on, and challenge, I guess, incorrect content. What do you think?
It feels like a bit of a movement towards it's the wiki model, right? Or it's a little bit more Reddit-like, right? It's decentralization, and in a lot of ways, I like that idea. And the alternative is, and what they were previously using were, other corporations whose sole job is just, we do fact checking and you pay us to do that, and we recruit people that fact check. And okay, they might do a good job of that, but there are always many motivations in business, right? And so when you give this back to the community, you do remove some of those sort of intrinsic motivations and potentials for bias. So I do like that aspect of it. It makes me wonder if the Meta bots are streamed into any of that community fact checking too, right? Like, do they get a go as well?
Yeah. Well, they've deleted them now, right? So yeah.
Yeah, but I do know, and from working in the media industry in the past, any kind of moderation is a really hard job to do satisfactorily for everyone.
Yeah,
it's hard to please everyone, and moderation, particularly fact checking at scale, is really, really hard. So yeah, it's going to be a good experiment to watch and see how it goes. But my gut feeling is it probably could be an improvement over sort of paid third parties.
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be one of those wait and see type things. There's certainly, as with any of these sort of changes, there's a backlash, right? And so there's been a lot of negative coverage around the change to date. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see if in 6-12 months that actually it sort of settles and people are reasonably accepting of the change. I think the reality is, though, there's never going to be a perfect scenario, and you're never going to please everyone, right? Because we're all going to have differing viewpoints on what's right, what's the truth or not, and so on, and who's speaking rubbish and who's not. And we've seen this with some of the fallout in the UK, where the Prime Minister Starmer. And he's sort of been called out by Musk, and there's a lot of backwards and forwards, and it's like I don't know who's telling the truth on some of that, some of these things. It's pretty heavy topics of of abuse in the UK. But I guess over time we'll get some reality there. But it seems like a lot of finger pointing and so on at the moment, and the technology's not necessarily able to solve all the issues, I guess.
There's potential for gaming the system in either case, right? So you get rid of the companies, you give it to the community, and then you can game the system in various ways. So I mean, I'm pretty sure the meta bots aren't in there, but there are other sort of concepts that people believe more or less in, or bot farms and political motivated sort of sentiment bombing, if you like. You quite often look at a site that's covered in reviews and go, yeah, but are these real? Are they bot farmed? Has there been some manipulation going on? So you'd have to rely on the ability to filter those to real and reliable community notes, or if you're going to rely on community notes, right? Now, in either case, I guess you're somewhat relying on Meta to do a good job of making sure that's happening.
Yeah, that the system works, and I don't know how you deal with the different biases that people have. I guess we'll see how that one plays out. Just one more on the New Zealand front is we saw news through that there's a new web-based tool to help greenhouse growers switch to geothermal heating, and this is, I think it's not expected to launch until March 2026, so it's still quite some way off, but it seems to make sense with geothermal, which is obviously being used to generate a chunk of our electricity in New Zealand, and it's one of the considered a renewable source. So I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more around that technology when it comes through, and maybe we'll hear a bit more closer to the time. But being able to tap into that geothermal to heat greenhouses, I guess in scenarios where they need a bit more heating, then that sounds like it would make a lot of sense for New Zealand. We've got that amazing situation that so much of our electricity is coming from renewables anyway, and if you can just tap into the heat directly, and I'm not sure of the technical realities of how they achieve this, but if you're able to tap into the geothermal heat directly for those greenhouses, that sounds pretty good.
When I first saw this article, I immediately thought it must be some kind of a scheme where you're just trying to funnel generated energy to different places, but it does appear, at least to be, this is a legitimate attempt to use physics to transfer heat directly from the geothermal source to the greenhouse, which obviously needs to be somehow co-located nearby. And it like immediately where my mind went, and I admit my mind is not normal, was like, what kind of brand names would you put on these things? Like if you were growing tomatoes on the side of a volcano, would they be volcanomatoes? Or would you have geopotatoes? Or like, where are you going to actually take this? Because that's like, ultimately you're going to take them into a supermarket and sell this, right?
Yeah. It's a good point. There's some interesting potential there from a branding perspective. Now, right at the end of the year over the break, we saw news that the new from the US Treasury saying they were hacked by China in a major incident, and by that sort of talking about state-sponsored hackers having broken into the US Treasury Department's technology systems in December, that they were able to access the computers of some of their staff and apparently unclassified documents. We're just going to keep hearing these stories, right? It doesn't seem to stop in terms of issues from a cyber perspective, and it does seem that those that are being attributed to to nation states and usually a reasonably sort of small list of them is continuing. So I think it's just a reminder for us all that no one's completely immune when you're getting entities like the US Treasury Department getting hit. And of course, we've seen most of the big, probably all of the big software and technology players get impacted at times. But I know challenging for New Zealand, where we've often got sort of smaller firms that don't have the same sort of levels of budget, but it is still really important that we consider these things, because there's a whole range of impacts, from those sort of nation state ones to those that are being held to ransom or having bank accounts impacted and the like.
Yeah, this appears to me to be yet another one of those sort of articles you see where the gist of it was, America says China did this, China said we didn't do it, and that's the article, right? Like there isn't much more to it. But it sort of really makes you a bit frustrated that, well, we don't know there's probably no way to know the truth. What do we do with this information, right? Do we just keep listening to the news? Like, someone's making some ad money on the fact that we read that article. We both read this article.
Yeah.
And it said nothing, basically. The BBC said basically nothing in an article. Great. They made some money. Is there a cybersecurity risk for companies like the US? Of course. But how do we know what to do with this information? Our attention is just being farmed.
Look, I think it's helpful that we know, but you have to also recognise that many of these sorts of things that are reported aren't necessarily backed up with evidence and so on. So you have to weigh those things up. Of course, a lot of things that happen from a cyber perspective are never shared publicly, because there's a lot of embarrassment that often goes with these things, and probably anybody working in the in this field will be aware of scenarios and cyber incidents that have taken place that haven't gained any kind of media attention, and largely because they those involved aren't wanting any attention. So it's important, I think, to keep things on the radar, but I take the point too. So
I've been a user of one of those sort of cybersecurity tools for a very, very long time, and one of the tools I use provides an alert whenever there's a hack for an account that you're associated with. So it's part of a password management system, right?
Yep.
So, and most people don't use this kind of system, but it would blow a lot of people's minds how often this happens, and it will specifically tell me when an attack happens on any account I have, and I look through the list, every month or two, and go, okay, huge, like giant brands, global brands, sites that everyone uses, hacked, passwords leaked. They're all over the internet. They're on the dark web. I get little alerts. Most people are just unaware, but there are daily hacks of sites that everybody uses, and our information is out there.
yeah.
So I mean, there's no wonder. Yeah, it's no wonder that nation states want to get in on the action too. But allegedly.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a big concern that gets very little attention, because frankly, it's a little bit boring and hard to understand and kind of esoteric for the average human, I think.
Yeah. We should talk about CES, what used to be known as Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah.
Not an event I have been going to the last bunch of summers, but I think I was last in Las Vegas. As someone was messaging me asking me if I was going to be at CES, and I said, I've already been in Las Vegas very recently, not going back that soon. But it was certainly a regular event on my calendar. These days I tend to enjoy the summer a little bit more and watch from afar, but lots and lots of announcements and news and varying bits and pieces, and a whole lot of reporting online around it. Some of the things that sort of caught my attention, just the ongoing increase in sort of autonomous systems of all sorts, with robotics and the like. Sounds like, masses of robots at CES now compared to, they were around from a robotic, what was it? I think there was a machine that, made you some food and would cook it and, do the whole process. Going back maybe 6 or 7 years, and we've seen an increase of those sort of things. John Deere with their farming equipment and tractors were out in force, and we've certainly seen the world of farming sort of move to a lot more automation, and we've got a number of these automated farms operating in New Zealand, and I guess this will continue, and what can be automated keeps increasing. So yeah, interesting to see that. The usual TVs, of course, and it's usually sort of CES where whatever the newest, latest thing is kind of tends to get announced when it comes to sort of TVs and a lot of other entertainment. I think the video cassette, the DVD, and so on. They were all sort of launched at CES over the years.
There's a lot of little incremental changes in the TV and the consumer electronics, but it strikes me that some of the robotic stuff is it seems to be where a lot of the hot action is happening at the moment, and the definition of robot is sort of starting to shift, I'm noticing.
Yes.
Just like the definition of AI is gradually shifting into the future. And now I heard an argument a while back that when a dishwasher was invented, it was considered a robot.
Yeah.
A dishwashing robot. And now, actually, a lot of the robots that I saw on the CES coverage were around domestic services. So doing laundry is quite a hot topic at the moment. So there's laundry cleaning and folding bots happening, and also just around generally cleaning up. And some of the robotic vacuums have been a thing for the last decade or so, and now they're starting to get robotic arms that will actually pick up socks and move things out of the way. And that was always one of the biggest problems. So my Roomba used to just get caught up on a rug, and now they can sort of solve these. So we're getting to the point where they're beyond experimental and starting to become truly useful labor-saving devices, which is the dream. And then one day, sometime hopefully soon, we're going to get this Tesla Optimus bot, and it's going to do absolutely anything. And then we can sit back and play PlayStation for more hours per day, right? Like that's the dream.
Yeah, and different people have different dreams. And I saw somebody saw some video footage of the robotic companion, or what one headline said, the girlfriend robot from CES. It just looked, like something looked like something out of your nightmares. It was quite weird, but we're certainly, what it is showing is a further step along the sort of continuum between reality and science fiction, and we're getting closer and closer to all those TV programs and movies that we've seen where there are characters that are supposedly robots, but they're obviously just acted by a person and so on.
Bearing in mind one person's nightmare is another person's dream, though, Paul, some people are waiting for these things. And I think there's very legitimate reasons that some people can benefit from having these things, even if they are purely there for, pleasure purposes or else. There was another one in there called the Mirumi bot. I don't know if you saw that one, but it's this was actually my personal favourite thing that I saw in the CES coverage. It's actually just a tiny little fluffy robot that you attach to your bag, or sort of the demo was showing it sitting on a handbag, and it literally does nothing apart from just sort of look around and sort of occasionally acknowledge people in the room. It's just a little robotic doll. But it's so cute and fun, and I thought if I was going to have I don't need a more high-resolution TV or a better whatever, but I would totally go for that thing.
And just pure fun, no.
It literally says in their marketing, this thing
things.
has no purpose.
Yeah, okay, love it.
And I like the honesty.
I mean, this is the reality, right? I mean, if you look at a lot of the stuff that comes through at a show like CES, if you were to look at it in the light and say, do I really need this? Then, the very large majority of it is going to be, no, you don't. But could it make my life a little bit better, a little bit more interesting? Gives me, something else that's helpful. Then, those things come through. But one of the things I saw on one of the lists was the TVs, and you're looking through and you're looking at the spec changes and the 8K this and the what's happening with the OLED panel and the refresh rates and these bits and pieces. Yeah, you just kind of look at that and you're like, these would be really, really nice TVs to have, but in the scheme of it, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But what we have seen at CES, I guess, over the last sort of maybe decade, has been a move towards often things that are less the sort of small consumer electronics, and this is probably partly why they removed Consumer Electronics Show as the name, and just called it CES. You do have things like the autonomous tractors. We had the vertical takeoff and landing. What were going to become autonomous taxi. Air taxis that haven't quite landed yet, you could say, and all other sort of manner of vehicles and autonomy. So yeah, still a really interesting show, and yeah, lots and lots of things to look at online. One thing I saw one of the BBC reporters talking about was a smart mirror that you could look at. I guess it was kind of a mirror TV kind of combined, bit of AI. It would have a look at you and then give you commentary around what products would improve your look and how you were looking and so on. Again, I'm not sure that anybody needs that, but the comment was that certainly for, I think this particular reporter was, this was going to save them money because it was suggesting alternative product to whatever product that they were using on their face, and it was going to be half the price. I'm not sure that you necessarily need a smart mirror to do that. I would think that there's, your phone can see you and can, tap you into services without having a smart mirror. But I guess, people are going to keep coming up with ideas, and probably most of the things that we see at CES will, the new edgy things at least, will at some point get incorporated somewhere into some technology, even if they themselves don't end up getting any traction, right?
There's a market for that smart mirror somewhere, and you never quite know where it'll be. Well, one of the things I noticed, and a lot of the media outlets do sort of a top 10 or pick a winner and things, and there was a couple of interesting winners on the list. One was in sort of an accessibility device, a smart cane for blind people was the winner of, I think it was the Engadget one. And CNET's roundup actually had the number one as sort of NVIDIA's new Cosmos AI model, which is interesting because obviously it's not really a consumer-oriented product at all.
No,
it's actually an AI model that is used for training AI. So if you're familiar with how AI learns, they're thinking, we can't have millions of robots running around the world making mistakes to figure out how to operate in the world, because it would cause all sorts of problems and people would keep falling over them. So what they've done, they've built this model which robots can basically virtually go into to learn how to operate in the real world. So they're training a robot to use the real world by simulating the real world, which is both like completely nonsensical and very sensible at the same time, but very, very interesting, right? It's synthetic data, but really on steroids.
Yeah, and that is one of the things I think we've seen from Wave out of the UK, which founded by a Kiwi who are doing the sort of the autonomous driving, and they've been generating, I guess, rather than having to, they don't have the advantage Tesla has of millions of vehicles on the road. So they're using AI to kind of generate and come up with all the scenarios for them to test on. So I think quite a bit of attention on NVIDIA and what they're up to, and it's fair to say they're doing incredibly well.
Yeah, I'd love to actually spend a bit of time being a gamer inside this virtual world that they've come up with, because I can imagine if an AI generated this model, we're getting super meta here, right? But if an AI generated this model, does it think about all the annoying things that humans will do just to troll for robots? Like, people are going to boot it and see if it falls off a cliff, whatever. Like, did they make a model that does that? Not sure. If they didn't do that, then all these robots are going to get booted off cliffs as soon as they start permeating society. You
mentioned this sort of picking up socks sort of robot before, and that one is interesting because it's, some of these things are really the start of something, right? I think it's Roborock, who, one of the big brands for the autonomous vacuum cleaners that's got this little arm that comes up and can pick up the socks and put them in place. At the moment, that just seems largely sort of pointless, but you can imagine a few generations down and this technology will actually get to a point where it's like, oh, that actually could be, it could do enough to be somewhat useful.
You're totally right. It's the first Darwinian mutation signal towards a future. Well, depending on what you believe in, of course, Paul. But the natural conclusion of that evolution is obviously any robot can do anything that involves hands and movement and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, if you look at the very clumsy robotic arm now, it's like it can't pick up much more than a sock because it's not very strong. Yeah. But it's not going to take long before people are hacking these Roombas and I think doing the Robo Wars style battles with them. Yeah. Because those arms could take it, they'd be rolling each other over and beating each other. I'm in a strange, like, anti-robot violent mood today, apparently.
Yeah, you could have robot wars, couldn't you, between your vacuum cleaners and see who can make the toughest. Yes. No, really interesting to sort of delve in and see some of these things that are going on. Before we wrap up, US Supreme Court, do you think they're going to uphold this ban on TikTok, which would mean because apparently they haven't got any sort of deal behind the scenes to sell TikTok in the US, that TikTok will be banned on I guess the 19th of January US time. There've been a number of kind of takes of this from when Trump was last president. He was suggesting something like that. This kind of mostly has really taken place under Biden's watch, this this current look to ban TikTok, but Trump has kind of pushed back a little bit on it, but it's supposed to come in the day before he's the inauguration. So what are you thinking on this? I'm really stuck as to because there's been so much backwards and forwards as to whether this will actually kick in. But worth remembering that India's ban on TikTok has been in place for years now, and largely content from India, stopped on TikTok years ago.
Yeah, a lot of this hinges on the definition of foreign adversary. So for the law that in question actually sort of defines a foreign adversary. So if US is considering China to be a foreign adversary, this is a platform under Chinese control. And so the whole question is, are they really a foreign adversary? By the letter of the law, apparently this is the pundits are saying this is likely to take effect. And the whole case is filled with claims of espionage and harassment, and there's all sorts of language being used in there. But I think it's actually, like a lot of those things are sort of like, yeah, maybe, but actually what this is about is attention control. And what, a lot of the arguments against TikTok are around how the algorithm is subtly different in different places. So if you're in the US, you get a slightly different experience than if you were in China, and it's tending towards something that you may consider to be propaganda-like mind control. PsyOps, right?
People spend hours staring at a screen.
Hours.
And you've got an algorithm that's kind of controlling what they see, and we've seen some pretty harsh consequences of that in varying ways. But it's really, really hard to monitor and to know the full story because every individual sees their own unique take. The algorithm's going to give you something different than what it would give me or anybody else, and you don't understand and know those subtleties. And I guess we've got markets like China, where TikTok is from, that largely have banned social media platforms from other countries. Now they've got some scale, and there's a whole lot of other aspects there that play into it.
So the real question is there intention behind the control of the algorithm, or is it being generated by our behavior, right? Because they're very different scenarios. And I think the implication from the US and the law is there is intention behind it and there is political motivation behind it. Whereas, you might also argue, actually, perhaps this is happening because the way we behave in this culture or country, whichever one it is causing the algorithm to skew in the favor of this because that's what we happen to look at. Now, actually, either case you could argue is a really bad outcome, right? Like neither of these are good cases. But yeah, the intention question is the key thing. And in fact, if we said, okay, banned, no one can access it, and assume nobody knows how to use a VPN and nobody will use it, we replace it with something else. Does the algorithm just drift back in the same direction? And then is that perhaps that's the only way to prove conclusively whether there's manipulation happening?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. If they do, disappear, it's certainly going to change some people's habits, and it will give a lift to, more than likely, US properties from the likes of Meta. Although there has been, some backlash online from people saying, well, go and use these other Chinese platforms and use those and go and start buying stuff from them, and let's get behind. And let's show our dislike. Let's support China. So
where does TikTok sit currently? Do you know, in terms of rankings globally for social media?
I think they're probably number one in social media and in a lot of markets.
If you ignore China, are they still number one?
Well, they're not actually in China under the TikTok brand anyway. They've got a whole nother product. But I think in terms of the social media platforms, and this is also that blurring between sort of, is YouTube social media, is TikTok, what are the things that define, social media. And, we heard about this with, say, Australia, where they will, they put in their ban for, it'll take some time to sort of go live, but they're moving to to block social media for everyone under 16. So if these so depending on where you draw those lines depends. Well, is it really social media? Is it video? Well, what's how do you draw those lines? And we get platforms like Telegram that come up as sort of social media because of how they get used, not necessarily just for sort of one-to-one messaging. And so there are some sort of blurry lines, I guess, around some of these tools that effectively all do fall into that sort of bigger world of social media. So
So in a world where I don't know, every say 16 to 28-year-old TikTok is it, right? It's your life, along with a few other things, but TikTok's up there now. If TikTok goes away, and I know that a lot of the other platforms are, emulating TikTok-like features in order to, potentially fill that gap. Where do you think the critical mass goes that are currently all the TikTokers? And by proxy, should I be investing in it, Paul? This is not advice.
Well, yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I've just asked ChatGPT around sort of rankings, and I'm not sure that I believe their data. And it also depends on how you look at it, because you can slice and dice data in a lot of different ways. TikTok coming up number 3 in Australia, number 4 in the US, and according to this, number 6 in New Zealand. At the top of these lists is Facebook, but I don't think that Facebook has the engagement that it once did. So although you've got TikTok style content across Facebook, Instagram, I guess you've got it on X, even LinkedIn now is doing these sort of short form vertical videos, right? As well as, YouTube and so on. So does it matter which one is number one and which one will be number one? I mean, I would pick that probably Instagram or YouTube are likely to sort of gain the most in terms of benefit. But I mean, these particular lists I'm looking at that have come from ChatGPT. Interestingly, YouTube is listed on the US list, but I'm not seeing it on the other lists. So how ChatGPT actually came up with the results, and it kind of looks like that the US list is really based on some global numbers, and of course that data probably actually isn't isn't necessarily accurate, right? Because there's a bunch of places that show different data, and a lot of the platforms don't consistently publish the data. Yeah, you've got other tools that try and estimate it, but
it sounds
it's
like
pretty hard
at
to
any
compare.
rate, your advice is keep investing in FANG.
I'm not giving
We
any
might-
investment advice today. I think we've got an episode coming up with Darcy Ungaro from NZ Everyday Investor. Maybe we can ask him a little bit around some of those tech investments. But I mean, I tend to think from an investing perspective, you want to look out as far as you can and put on your futurist hat and think, well, what are the trends and the changes that are gonna really make a big difference over the long term? And that's actually really hard to do unless you've got particular knowledge in an area. And then of course things can come in. Not that you can invest in TikTok, but if you could, I think there'd probably be a lot of Kiwis who would have invested because it's got such high uptake and people spend such a large amount of time on it. But yeah, an event like this can make a huge difference to their viability.
Well, I've got a personal view on this, which is I'm waiting for the decentralization and open sourcing of all of the social media we do. Now, we keep seeing little movements towards it. We keep seeing, like, well, you can try Mammoth, you can try this, you can try that. None of them really get traction for more than a few weeks and a couple of hot media cycles, and then we sort of end up falling back to whatever. Now, when is this going to happen is the question, right? Like, is ByteDance the moment that kind of spurs a movement? Is it another few years from now? Surely it has to happen because we're still in this very sort of ad-driven, the user is the customer world. And at some point, something has to give, right? But when does that happen? I would love to see this being a moment where we go, can we just get rid of this big social media world, right? It's been long enough. It's been 20 years now. I remember you and I were friends, Paul, on Friendster, I think, in the 90s maybe, or the early 2000s, something like that.
Yeah, early 2000s, pre-Facebook.
We've been through Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3. Now, when do we get to this decentralized model? And I don't care if it's blockchain-based, open-sourced, like maybe Meta's bots can go and do that since they're out of jobs.
We will see. The future typically doesn't land exactly as we imagine it, but often some variation thereof. So we'll keep watching this space. Yeah. Well, great to have you on the show again. Great to catch up, and always interesting insights from you, Josh. You've always been something of a futurist and thinking ahead and joining up dots and coming up with things that others might not see. So yeah, great to chat. Of course, a big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark HP, and Gorilla Technology. Before we finish up, anything else you wanted to share around sort of work you've been doing or how people can get in touch with you and so on?
I'm mostly working for a company called Hyper HYPR, and we're a consultancy. We're doing innovation, we're doing new product development, and anyone who's doing that in the corporate space can come and work with Hyper. We're a really talented, amazing team of people that move big rocks really fast, basically. So that's what we're doing. Yeah, it's an exciting time at the moment. I'm sort of forbidden to talk about some of the work we do because a lot of it's sort of top secret, new stuff that is in stealth mode. But yeah, right now we're having a lot of fun playing with sort of a hybrid between hardware and software. So it's a very interesting project, and for someone that's spent a lot of their life purely in the software world, starting to get to play with some real physical manifestations and all of the interplay between those. So yeah, that's been a good time for me lately. That's life today.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, well, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we'll look forward to what comes up throughout the year. Thanks everyone for listening in. If you've got any ideas or suggestions of content you're keen for us to focus on, definitely get in touch. Would love to hear from you. So if you've been listening to the audio, look us up on your favorite social media platform and follow us in those locations to get access to live streams and future videos. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.